Give ear, O my people, to my teaching. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from of old. We will not hide them from their children. We will tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. In the sight of their ancestors, he worked marvels. In the land of Egypt, in the fields of Zoan. He divided the sea and let them pass through it, and made the waters stand like a heap. In the daytime he led them with a cloud, and all night long with a fiery light. He split rocks open in the wilderness and gave them drink abundantly as from the deep. He made streams come out of the rock and caused waters to flow down like rivers. They tested God in their heart by demanding the food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the wilderness? Even though he struck the rock so that the water gushed out and torrents overflowed, can he also give bread or provide meat for his people?" Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven. He rained down on them manna to eat and gave them the grain of heaven. Mortals ate of the bread of angels. He sent them food in abundance, and ate and were filled. So he gave them what they craved. Then he led out his people like sheep and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. He led them in safety so that they were not afraid, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. And he brought them to his holy hill, to the mountain that his right hand had won. He drove out nations before them. He apportioned them for a possession, and settled the tribes of Israel in their tents.
Thank you. Now, if I stay between these two places, I think I'll be okay. Good morning and welcome. So we began on Friday night by thinking about encounters on the road and encounters in the dining room at Amos with the servant girl, and how encounter is key to our journey of faith. And if we look back at our life of faith, we would be able to mark it by different encounters that have taken place. And then yesterday we talked a little bit about the temple, about we are this temple, and the temple, the glory of God contained in the temple and in us is not huge and large, because God does not have to prove himself, doesn't have to demonstrate his power. But there is in each one of us a pure place of, Thomas Merton calls it complete emptiness, because that's the only way to describe the power of God. And if we could ever act out of that single pure emptiness, we could move mountains. I love that image. So we're going to talk a little bit about today about encounters in the temple, and we're going to talk a little bit about the encounters with strangers. In some ways that's because I think that's where we find ourselves as a church today. You and I grew up and saw a change from having complete confidence that we knew and possessed the truth. We were Catholics, and God was with us, and we had all the answers, and we could, with confidence, teach catechism and live our faith, and we just took all that for granted. And in our lifespan, we've moved from that experience to one of uncertainty and hesitancy and insecurity. At least I find that's true for myself when I think about that. We went from absolute certainty about who we were, where we came from, who was in charge of the world, to all kinds of questions and doubts about those realities. I think that's a huge transformation that's taken place, and in a very short period of time. But it was building up over a very long period of time. So think about this for a minute, is that from the time of Jesus' death and resurrection for 1,500 years, this is quite a chunk of time, we believed that the earth was the center of the universe. No? We were absolutely convinced about that. We believed that everything that moved in the world, every object that moved, everything that happened was directly caused by God. That God had all the power and God caused everything to happen. And we also believed that God had created us as a standalone, unique creature, unlike any other creature at all. We believed those three things for 1,500 years. Amazing. Thomas Aquinas believed those things. All of the great teachers believed those things. The great saints believed those things. And look what happened in 300 or 400 years. So in 1400 AD, Copernicus helped us to discover that we were not the center of the universe, but the sun was. And we revolved around the sun. That's 1400. In 1600, Newton discovered the laws of gravity. What caused things to fall like apples from the tree? Not God. Gravity. And in 1800, Darwin published his book on the origin of the species, and we suddenly came face to face with the fact that we had evolved. We were somehow connected with all other living creatures. Just think about those three incredible changes that took place. 1400, Copernicus told us we were not the center of the universe, which helped us to believe that God really thought we were really important. But we were this dusty little planet. Not particularly wonderful. And around us were a billion other planets. And we lived, and we slowly come to realize this universe of ours is 13 billion years old. And this earth that we live on is 6 billion years old. And human beings have been living on this planet for some 60,000 years. All of those discoveries really rattled us. And then Newton came along with the laws of physics, and we realized God didn't cause things to move, nature did. And now we're struggling with quantum physics, which tells us that the world is not made up of tiny little objects that bump into each other, but it's made up of energy. And energy can be anywhere. Energy just flows. And energy is inside of us, it's in creation, and it flows back and forth. It's not particles, it's movement and power. And then, of course, Darwin came along, and all of a sudden we were faced with evolution, and not just biological evolution, as Desjardins and others have taught us, but the evolution of consciousness, of awareness. Those are all those realities. And I think together, that combination, it kind of unseated us as a church. It made us less confident, less sure, because all of a sudden we weren't sure where we came from, and we weren't sure who made us, and we weren't sure what caused things to happen in the world. So all of a sudden, doubt entered into our church in a big way. And we struggled with that. We had real difficulties with evolution for quite a long period of time. And we still have difficulties talking about how creation has come to this point in this existence. In my preaching, I always keep trying to make mention of the fact that the earth is 6 billion years old, and just before Christmas, the James Webb telescope, which is floating way out in space, it took a picture of a galaxy called the Firefly Galaxy that is 11 billion years old. You know, that galaxy was born shortly after creation. Isn't that amazing? And that light from that galaxy took 11 billion years to reach that telescope. That's just really stunning. And now we're struggling with this whole thing about evolution and the human genome type And we're talking about editing genes. And our young people, they're familiar with that world. That's the world they know. They know all about science. They know all about creation. They all know all about the universe. And you know something? They never hear it mentioned in church at all. I think that's a tragedy. It's like when they come to church, they hear us speaking Old Greek. And when they go out into the world, they're speaking modern eucalyptus. They don't understand our language. They don't understand what the stories we're telling. We're Grandma and Grandpa's church. Because we never talk about creation. We never talk about evolution. We never talk about science. At all. Priests don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. And we wonder why they don't come to church. Well, I can tell you. I think that's one of the big reasons for it. So one of the things that we find ourselves now discovering is that right next to us are people who don't believe what we believe. And they're not just out there. They're in the church. They had a really interesting survey a couple of years ago about Catholics. In the Catholic Church, 50% of the Catholics who are in the pew are engaged. That means they're committed to the parish, they're involved in the parish. They probably are doing volunteer work. Another 25% are not engaged, they're just there. They're just a warm body. And another 25% are actively disengaged. In other words, they're there reluctantly, and they're angry, and they don't believe what they're hearing. 25% of the people in the pew don't believe what they're hearing from the pulpit. Kind of should make us wake up a little bit. So we now find ourselves on this journey, and it's a journey where we used to think everybody around us believed the same things we believed. And we all had a common faith. Even with our other Christian sisters and brothers, we all had a common faith. It's not the case anymore. Now we find ourselves traveling in the company of atheists and agnostics, and they're not out there. They're in the church. They're probably in religious communities too. All of a sudden now we're faced with deep questions of doubt and about our origin, where we've come from, where we're going. So how are we going to manage this accompaniment? Because I was brought up to think an atheist was an enemy. That they were someone I was opposed to because they didn't believe what I believed. And that doubt was an enemy. You should never have doubt. You should never allow doubt to be in your heart. I think what I'm coming to believe now more and more is that faith and doubt are sisters of the same family. They live in the same family. Faith and doubt are sisters. And they travel together. It's never pure faith or pure doubt. The two of them are traveling together. They're sisters in the same community. If you have only doubt, if that's all that's in your heart, then you end up with fascism and militant secularism. That's what you end up with. Rampant socialism, where the individual doesn't matter at all. If that's all you have is doubt. But if all you have is faith, then you end up as a fundamentalist. You're intolerant of other people. You're intolerant of other religions. So if you have pure faith, you end up as a fundamentalist. And if you have pure doubt, you end up as a fascist, a secularist. So faith and doubt are sisters. They travel together. It's really important that we somehow acknowledge that we're partners. And that people who have doubts, it's not that they don't accept or don't believe. Very often it's a matter of they're impatient. They're frustrated and impatient with the fact that God has not done what God is supposed to do. There's injustice in the world, there's poverty in the world, there's all these tragedies in the world, and if God is God, what isn't He doing what He's supposed to do? And so I don't believe you. I don't believe you people. But it's frustration over what we proclaim is God's responsibility. God is supposed to do these things, He isn't doing them, so I don't believe you. They're impatient because God hasn't done them yet. Yet. But often they don't see that. Patience is one of the really key things that we're going to need to walk with our sister Doubt on this journey. But we have a patron saint of atheists. This, I don't think you knew this, but you actually have a stained glass window in your little heritage room dedicated to the patron saint of atheists. It's Saint Therese of Lisieux. Did you know that? Isn't this interesting? She grew up very devout. Her whole life lived as a woman of faith until the end. At the end of her life, she found herself, she lost her faith. And she found herself in the company of atheists. And she was stunned. Because all her life she couldn't believe that there were people who did not believe in God. Her whole life she believed that. And now she says, and now I'm eating at their table. I'm in their company. And she has a lovely phrase, far from all suns. That's where she found herself. Far from all suns. S-U-N-S. Far from all light. But she said, what God, the Lord, is trying to teach me is that now in the church there's room for these people because I'm one of them. And the Lord has not abandoned me. So how can He possibly have abandoned them? So somehow they must belong in the church as well. And her other message, which is quite wonderful, she says, when you find yourselves beset with doubt and have fallen from this mountain of faith, do not be afraid, because the Lord will meet you in what she called the valley of disbelief. Isn't that a lovely image, eh? The Lord will find you in the valley of disbelief. Wonderful woman. I love this idea that we now have a patron saint of atheists. And she's in your heritage room. Lovely stained glass window dedicated to her. But what all of that has done is it's opened for us the reality that the encounter with the stranger is a key part of our growth in faith. We started out, I did, I'm sure it's true for you, believing that everybody around me believed the same things as I did. We all had the common faith. We all shared that faith. And then over these decades, come to realize, no, we don't. And there's many people around us who don't believe at all what I believe. But they're really good people. They're loving people. They're generous people. They're faithful people. In many cases, they're very dedicated to social causes too. They're wonderful people. So somehow they can't be enemies. So can we look at them as strangers? Not enemies, but strangers. And once we start to do that, we discover that in the center of our own faith journey are these encounters with strangers. We get to look at our pamphlet now, Encountering the Stranger. So the first one, on Sunday, May 25th, Encountering the Stranger, is the hospitality of Abraham. It's really an interesting story. You know the story. I better get back up here. There'll be complaints from upstairs that he's wandering again. Don't let him wander down there, ladies. Abraham and Sarah are sitting at their tent in the desert, and these visitors come. Now, you have to keep in mind here, Abraham doesn't know who they are. It's just like the story of Amos. The disciples on the road to Amos did not know who that stranger was, nor did Abraham or Sarah. These strangers arrive, and now there is this question. The question is, how am I going to greet the stranger? Am I going to greet them with hospitality or hostility? Am I going to treat them as an enemy or a stranger? It's really important for us to take a moment and be in that moment prior to what happens, because we always fast forward in that story. You know, it turns out they're messengers from God, and they tell Abraham and Sarah, next time when we come, you will have a child. You know how the story ends, right? We always fast forward to that. But we forget that that story could have ended differently. Abraham could have barred the door to the tent. He could have said, I don't trust you. You're not welcome here. Go away. I don't want anything to do with you. And there would not have been a child. We have to allow that moment to exist, because in that moment there's a wager going on. Am I going to bet on hospitality, or am I going to bet on hostility? How am I going to greet this person? Are they an enemy, or are they a stranger? And my greeting changes who they are. If I greet them with hostility and a closed heart, a closed mind, they become an enemy. If I greet them with openness and a desire to learn and to love, they become a friend. I determine what they are. They don't start out as an enemy. They start out as a stranger. And then on the next page, we have Botticelli's wonderful painting. I'm sorry the pictures are so small, but you can get out a magnifying glass afterwards and look up the details in this lovely painting. And I don't know much about art, but I really like this painting. First of all, I want you to look through the window. Can you see the window behind Mary? Now, when you get your magnifying glass out, you will see there's a bridge there that's under construction. It's not complete. It's being built. And what Botticelli wants us to understand is that Mary had a life. She was engaged in that world up there. And she was getting ready to cross the bridge and go into the town once the bridge was built. That's very different from the picture that I grew up with of Mary in that moment. I grew up with that picture of Mary being completely disposed, ready for this encounter. Everything was going to fall into place. But what Botticelli is suggesting in the painting is, no, she has options. And the options are in the window. And you can see the option once you get a close look at it. There's a bridge into another life there. That Mary could have got on the bridge and gone on with her life. Met a really nice boy, raised a family, done good things. And you can see in her posture that she's sort of half turning away. Can you see that gesture? She's going like this. You know? Like, you can almost hear her saying, you go away. You go somewhere else. Don't bring me that good news. I don't want to hear that. No, you go somewhere else. Go away. I don't believe in you. We have to stay in that moment and let that moment sink into us, because that moment exists in all of us. That moment when God approaches us, we say, I don't believe anymore. I don't share that faith. You're a stranger. I have my little life. It's okay. I don't need you anymore. And then Andrew Hudgens, he wrote this poem to accompany the painting. It's quite a beautiful poem. The angel has already said, be not afraid. He said, the power of the Most High will darken you. Her eyes are downcast, half closed, and there's a long pause. A pause here of forever as the angel crowds her. She backs away, her left side pressed against the picture frame. he kneels. He's come in all unearthly innocence to tell her of glory, not knowing, not remembering how terrible it is. And Botticelli gives her an eternity to turn. Look out the doorway, where on a far hill floats a castle, and halfway across the river toward it, just a bridge, not completed. And neither is the touch, angel to virgin. Both her hands held up, both elegant. One raised as if to say, stop, while the other hand, the right one, reaches toward his. And as it does, it parts her blue robe and reveals the concealed red of her inner garment to the red tiles of the floor and the red folds of the angel's robe. But her whole body pulls away. Only her head, already haloed, bows, acquiescing. And though she will, she's not yet said, behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. As Botticelli, in his great pity, lets her refuse, accept, refuse, and think again. It's a lovely poem, isn't it? Quite love the poem. I love the picture. I think it's so important for us to allow those moments which we always glossed over them when I was taught. Mary was chosen by God to say yes, and she was ready to say yes. It was all automatic. But now, through images like this, it helps us to find a place in this journey where we're accompanying people who are just like Mary, refusing, torn, indecisive, disbelieving. I think it allows us to make room for them on this journey. And to understand that now in this encounter we have with a stranger, we are going to determine the outcome. If Abraham and Sarah had said no, there would have been no child. If Mary had said no, the incarnation would never have happened. So what's emerging from these stories and stories like this is not a God who's in charge of creation like I once believed, orchestrating every moment, determining the outcome, with the outcome already predetermined. All it has to do is unfold. But now I have a God who is the God of the possible. Not a God of power, but a God of possibility, who approaches us with a possibility. One of the ways of describing the burning bush, that encounter that Moses has in the desert, is God says to Moses, I will be who I will be if you accompany me. I will be who I will be if you accompany me. And if you say no, it won't happen. God is the God of possibility now. And it's going to be up to us to answer the possibility. In every moment, there's the possibility of goodness, and the possibility of non-goodness. It exists in every moment. And God is not going to overplay God's hand. God is not going to bring about the kingdom without our cooperation. He's not going to accomplish this without us. God has partnered with us, and God is going to be present, saying, I'm going to present impossibilities sometimes to you, like this one. And if you say yes, we can do this. But if you say no, it won't happen. But I'll present another possibility. I'm not going to give up. I'll find another possibility. And we'll try something else. But I think it frees us up to have conversations with young people about creation and about the world, Because what they're saying to the church is, we're concerned about this environment. We're concerned about what's happening to creation. Where are you? Where are you guys? Are you on board with us? Do you care? Or do you think God's going to just look after it? And sometimes I think the message we give them is, oh, God will look after this. Don't worry, it'll all turn out fine. They don't believe that. And they don't believe us when we say it. And I don't believe it either. I think the future of this planet is tied to our own salvation. Either we save the planet and ourselves, or we don't. But there is no saving of ourselves independent of this. God loves the planet as much as He loves you. He created it. He created the whole universe 13.5 billion years ago. He loves every galaxy that's come into existence, just as much as He loves the earth and every creature on the earth. We are the consciousness of creation. We're the only part of creation that can speak back to God. And this encounter, like Mary and the angel, is going on all the time. Are you going to accompany God? Are you going to say no? And indifference is not an option for us. Especially if we're going to have conversations with young people. They want to know where our church is at with this, and they're basically hearing silence. Nothing. They don't hear anything from priests, they don't hear anything from bishops, they don't hear anything about this. This is the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, and it's been largely ignored for 10 years. There are pockets of it, but basically Francis said, this is our common home. It's God's home. God loves it as much as He loves us. But we act as if it doesn't matter. And I really think it's put at crisis the possibility of having conversation with young people today. But I like this idea, but a conversation with a stranger doesn't mean that because they don't believe everything we think that there isn't faith in there. But how we respond to them is what's going to grow that faith and enable us to have a conversation about our own future and the future of creation. And I think we have to take risks and say, tell me what you believe about this world, about creation. Tell me what you think about what God did 13 billion years ago. Tell me what you're doing about that world. The Marthas have done some wonderful things with that world. They should be hearing those things from us. It's wonderful stories. And we can, if we have those conversations, turn them from strangers into friends and not into enemies. So that's kind of enough for today, I think. We're good. So we'll sing that couple verses of that lovely song again. The Lord gives them bread from heaven. Wonderful. Thank you.